You own your brand, whether you want one or not. Who would you rather influence your brand, you or other people? And a good way to think about that, you don't have to be out shouting from the rooftops or posting on LinkedIn every day or any of that stuff. But think about what are the first three words you want people to think about when they hear your name? Mm-hmm. And then step into that every opportunity you have.
Tammy, welcome to the show.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with your audience today. So I'm Tammy Alvarez. I'm the founder of the Career Winners Circle, where we empower business leaders to make a big impact and love every single Monday morning again. So if you find that you are waking up on Mondays dreading the silliness ahead, or you get that pit in your stomach on Sunday nights, then this is something you want to stay tuned into. So I spent my corporate career as a C-suite executive on Wall Street. So when I left my corporate career about 6 years ago, I was leading about 2,000 people in 35 countries. And my teams were really known as high-end transformation teams. So whenever there was drama and the buildings were burning, me and my team were running in as everyone else was running out. So I did that for a really long time. I loved my career until I didn't. And that's when I decided to cash out of Wall Street, move to a tropical island off the coast of Belize, and start this coaching business about 6 years ago. And now we're servicing businesses and individuals around the world in trying to make sure that we are on a mission to eradicate the apathetic haze that has taken over corporations these days.
Can you walk me through your thesis on why corporate work sucked or has gotten worse or better? Like, what's the root cause of why corporate jobs are tough? And people are just opting out and going to a tropical island, right? You're not the only one.
Absolutely not. And although some people don't make it as dramatic of a shift in terms of, okay, we're going to expatriate and just do all the things new, which is probably the most terrifying thing I've ever done in my entire career. And so let's talk about what this means in terms of this apathetic haze. So Gallup did 2 surveys. I thought, well, really telling. And one survey was a global survey of knowledge workers. And it asked about how satisfied you are with your job. And 80% of people are satisfied with their job. Sounds pretty good, right? But then they asked a different question a little bit later. And they asked, how engaged are you with your job? How much do you actually care about what's happening? And that number plummeted to 20%. So 60% of us are in this good enough phase. It's a paycheck. It's not that bad. It's not that hard. It's all right. And we're just in this haze of just good enough, in this haze of complacency. And I think, at least the people that we work with in terms of our clients, they want more for themselves, right? Just everyone just kind of shuffles in and shuffles out. Nobody's smiling. Nobody's making eye contact. And no one, from what we do for a living, we don't want that for ourselves. And businesses certainly don't want that. And so if 2 groups of people who have the same interests in mind and want the same thing, why are we continuing to get further and further apart in terms of the relationship between the employee and the employer? And this divide is just continuing to get bigger. And it's been going on for decades. And the interesting thing is it is so easy to solve. Despite the millions or probably billions of dollars and hours that are spent on employee engagement surveys and pulse surveys and all these initiatives and all these things and foosball tables and beer on Fridays and all these things, why is it still so difficult to get these 2 constituents really on the same page and moving towards the same goals? And so that's what we talk about when we're talking about that apathetic haze. So as an individual or as a leader for an organization, if you find that you and your team try to have a big dose of what I call, because I had it, I don't give a shit-itis, then it's time to rethink about how we do things.
Yeah, it makes me think about like quiet quitting. Do you feel like one of the reasons it's probably, I'm going to say it's probably gotten worse, right? With like millennials tried to play nice, and then Gen Z's like, I don't care. But the idea was that we had like a couple, not like novel economic crises in the last 20 years, and noticing that most employers are either, if there is a group of business leaders that do care about the mission of their company, it's very few, and most are treating the business as a financial arbitrage machine and the employees as a means to an end. to get a big exit one day. There's this really funny quote from that show, Silicon Valley. It just came up today on my TikTok feed, but it was, for anyone that hasn't watched the show, it's hilarious. It's a perfect representation of what Silicon Valley culture is. And they're talking about like, hey, the AWS servers are really messing with our runway as we scale. And then the CEO is like, okay, well, that's okay because we'll do a subscription model. And the investor's there. And he's like, no revenue. Because if you tell them revenue, they're going to ask how much. It's never going to be enough. Why would you want revenue? And he's like, well, I thought businesses are supposed to make money. And he's like, no. All that matters is what you're valued at. I don't want to make a little bit of money every day. I want to make a bunch of money in one day, like ROI and stuff. Do you feel like that's why most business leaders, most employers are just looking at the business as a financial arbitrage machine to just exit? And we've recognized that. And we're just like, well, I don't want to work to make you rich.
I think that's part of it, but I think that's a piece of the story. Most business owners and executives, because we work a lot with middle market companies that are in the STEM fields to kind of help them eradicate this apathetic haze, because that's the area where we have the opportunity to really make the biggest impact, because the level of fungible resources is limited. Right? You go to big corporate and there's 30% of the people that don't do a thing, right? And so they've got a lot of fungibility. You got small guys who are just trying to keep, their hair on fire and keep the ball rolling. But the middle market is really facing what they're calling a talent crisis. So we got everybody getting laid off, and we got the middle market thinking there's nobody around. And these founders, especially when they're still owner founders and things like that, they created this business not for a payout. That's not how they originally started. They originally started with some passion and a dream and an idea. And that's how all businesses start, is wanting to make something better. But over time, things get messy, things get big, they get out of control, we lose perspective, and then there becomes this big divide. And I think the reason our newest generation has that loyalty to me first and on my terms is because they saw their parents be impacted by just completely non-discretionary layoffs. Right? They saw their parents struggle with that. They saw their parents with their dedication and their 14 hours a day, and they get like a anyway. So what is the point? And so I think like everything else in business, there's this pendulum that continues to swing. And it goes really far one way, and then it goes really far the other way, and eventually we kind of come back in the middle. And I do think we're in that phase now where, especially with COVID, right, had that upper hand. No question about it, right? Like it was an employee's market. You could make whatever you wanted and work for whoever you wanted to. And then once things started to normalize, people started to call people back to work. And then things kind of went the other way. Then you got the big tech layoffs and all that stuff that we've been seeing over the past year or so. And it was interesting. I was reading an article in the Wall Street Journal yesterday about the end of an era. Like this is the end of, where it's like the land of milk and honey for employees in terms of the job market. Not sure I agree with that. I think it's a bit dramatic, but we'll see how that goes. And so, but at the end of the day, whether your founder wants a big payout or not, they still have customers to serve, right? They still have innovation that they want to bring to the market. They still have an impact that they want to make, and they need a strong team to be able to do that. And from a team perspective, there's a reason you're not an entrepreneur. You don't want to take the risk. Fair enough. For 45 years, right? Well, that's not my game. I'm not doing that. So, but how do you tap into the things that you're ambitious about from a personal perspective? Like what gets you out of bed in the morning, regardless of what you do? And then how can you tie those ambitions to the company's biggest goals? And from an owner, from an executive perspective, how can you put humanity back into the workplace? Because I think we have gone so far afield in terms of treating our teams like humans. But the reality is when we restore humanity back into the workplace and we're able to connect ambition and company goals, then everybody wins. Because you're doing the things that naturally light you up. So you feel energy, you feel that joy, you feel that sense of purpose. And you're applying your talents to where it's needed most versus having this feeling like, what is the point? Why am I doing this? Does it even matter? And that's really where I see the biggest disconnect is just because of corporations, they manage what they can measure, right? We can measure compensation. We can measure benefits. We can measure titles, span of control, all of those things. Ambition's hard to measure, right? And what are your aspirations? Those are hard to measure. And then how do you do that? And so I think because with HR and legal and all of these well-intended guardrails that have been put up, right, to prevent lawsuits, which is how it actually really work, and to like give everybody a fair playing field, I think we've gone too far over in terms of now we don't treat anybody like they should be. Like, and I would encourage everybody who's listening here, who's a leader, do you know your employees? Are they married? Are they have partners? Do they have kids? They like dogs, cats? What do they do for vacation? What do they love to do? Most managers have no idea because we're told to keep our guard up. We're told to keep work, and keep personal. And I think that's the biggest mistake we could possibly make. And we're seeing the results of that now in even more significant proportions.
Reminds me of a podcast I listened to of Rory Sutherland, the Ogilvy VP, and he's like fantastic. And he just talks about how we're too rational in business, to your point, and how we should approach things from like a psychoanalytical perspective of human behavior. And you're right. I've definitely felt that way. Like, what's the point of really doubling down and trying to impress this VP? Because as soon as it's convenient for them, they'll lay me off. And it led to me being less engaged, where it was more of like I won't say it's quiet quitting, but it's just like, I'm just doing my job description and I'm not trying to get promoted. I'm just trying to make time for my side hustles. Scott Galloway talked about how a side hustle means that your main hustle isn't working. And so you're like workshopping a different hustle.
Right.
But the insight, what I just learned from you is just because someone's not engaged doesn't mean they're not ambitious anymore.
They are. Like, no one starts a job saying, I cannot wait for my day one. I know this is going to suck. Like, I'm excited about this new opportunity. And so I do believe that there is this untapped force that's just lying dormant within organizations. And with a few small tweaks, everything can change. And when we talk to business leaders and owners and boards of directors from middle market companies, you can significantly increase your revenue, profitability, performance, quality, customer satisfaction, and key talent retention without having to change a thing in terms of process, hiring new people, or new products. And it's all about how you start to leverage the team that you have. You tap into their ambition. You let them play to their strengths more often. Because what I find is that people who, and I'll tell, it's interesting, your mindset on just doing my job because I'm going to lay me off anyway. So remind me to come back to that in just a second. But when we're talking about how executives can start to ignite that unstoppable force, it really is to understand who that human being is, how what they're driven and motivated by, what they love to do. And what are the things they could do for 12 hours a day and end the day more energized than when they started, and use those powers to do the things that your company needs the most. And so when you take that different perspective, then that means you organize work a little bit differently. That means you look at talent planning a little bit differently, and succession planning, and career hopping. But you're not changing anything significant. These small tweaks make a massive difference in steady state business as usual. Now, what I've always found is when times are tough and things are uncertain, the best time to surge is when everyone else is hiding under their desks so they don't get fired. Because in chaos, there is always opportunity. And when you start to say, oh, hang on a second, I can lead this effort that everyone else is afraid to lead. I can work on this area of innovation and bring my creativity to light to help get us out of this trouble. We can disrupt our industry by doing this. And when you do that, which A, is more fun than just mailing it in, right, and working on your side hustle, and being more impactful for the business, you are not the one that ever gets laid off. You're the one who is driving that strategy to figure out who stays and who goes. You're the one driving that strategy to figure out what is our opportunity for revenue, for profitability, and for increased market share. In the book, we talk a lot about treating your career like a business. We have the business skills that we need already. We know how to create a strategy, a vision, execute, get the people around the table that we need to, deal with adversity, all of these things. But we don't take those same skills and apply it to our career. And so today, everyone that's listening, congratulations, you just got promoted. because now you are the CEO of your career and you're the CEO of you incorporated. And when you start to take that business mindset, then you start to show up differently. I'll give you a great example. I was just switching a new client on Monday, actually. And she's a very senior executive. And she has been killing herself for 5 years, 14-hour days, all for the promise of that next level promotion, which comes with a giant bonus and a lot of perks. She's been working for 5 years for the promise that she's going to get this. It goes before the board. It gets approved. She's not supposed to know this. And they do a reorg and she gets a new boss who now wants to put her a step back so she can re-earn her way up. Now, if you don't think she's out of her ever-loving mind at this point, right? If you were a business, and if I said to you, you're working for me as a vendor, and said, listen, I had a ton of work I need you to do. It's very hard, really stressful. But in 5 years, I probably am going to be able to pay you for that time. What would you tell me?
Yeah.
Hell no.
I can't think of like the less like, the PG version, PG-13 version. Yeah,
right? And so from that standpoint, right, we do these things every single day thinking that this is the right thing to do. And the reality is, when you set those guidelines and boundaries, when you walk in and say, no, sorry, I'm happy to help and I'm going to get paid for my time as I'm doing it, companies will start to do the things that you want them to do. But you have to set the guidelines because they are going to do whatever they need to be successful. Think about how they choose vendors, right? So if you're the CEO of You Inc., this is just a company that you love the people, you love the work, but you're not emotionally connected to it. And that's the big thing because it's a business industry. Like when you look at how your company selects vendors, they want highest value for the least amount of money. And so that's how they select their people. So they will continue to get the value for the least amount of money until they can't. It's not personal, not malicious. It's how they stay in business. But you as the CEO also are doing the thing where you are going to do the best job and do the things that excite you for the best possible role and the highest possible rate. So, and somewhere in the middle is where you meet. So this idea that we are victims of the system, I think if you start to change your mindset and become that CEO of your career, and as a business, which really surprised me, companies actually want their people to do this. I wrote the book for the disenfranchised worker, right? So if you hate Mondays, you need to buy Escape in the Career Trap. What I didn't expect is that companies are hiring me to come in and do keynote speeches on this exact message because they want their people to step up. They want their people to care. They want their people to take ownership because they know that whatever it costs them in terms of extra money or, whatever it comes down to, they are going to see returns tenfold because our ambition, that fire, that drive, that caring again comes back. And everybody wins. And so I think that's just, part of the dynamic now where we have more control than we think we do.
Yeah, one of the big career unlocks for me, it wasn't the same mental model, but it was just more of like, hey, like this maxim really unlocked it for me, that amateurs try to do things right. Professionals make sure that something doesn't fail. And like that professional mindset of doing the practical things to prevent something from failing changed my whole approach to like business. Cause I think like amateurs are like, no, you get a promotion, you work 5 years, you work hard, that you do like, that's how you do it. That's the right way to do things, and that's how most of like our, parents taught us, right? Like, hey, be good, be nice. And now it's like, no, I'm a professional. That means I'm going to talk back. I'm not going to, I'm going to challenge a request and be like, well, it's my professional opinion that that's not a good idea. And like, this is my recommendation, like as an advisor that you hired me. And so I started acting more like an advisor, and that they were just my one big client. Like we're all kind of consultants in like the professional white collar world.
And that you're 100% on target with that. And if you can take that relationship, because a lot of people are afraid, and I think companies are a little afraid too, that if everybody adopts this CEO of You Incorporated mindset, that the loyalty is gone, and that camaraderie and that, we're in this together goes away. And actually, I found the opposite. Because everyone's there because they choose to. because everyone now cares about the outcome. Now that unification and that connectivity, now that connective tissue between coworkers and teams and leaders and executive teams gets stronger. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I think I care more about my customers' outcomes as an outsider than sometimes people on the inside do. Like, no, you need to do this, right? And so I think being worried about when you start to really turn this into a business decision. Like, I'm choosing to do it. I'm choosing to do these things. I'm excited about this, and I'm stepping into the things that really are my strengths to help make these things come alive. Then all of a sudden, everybody's leaning in. And the outliers that are still hiding under their desks or just marrying it in, then they start to really feel like outliers. And you bring up the lesson too with you just by example and by that energy. And so it's really interesting. And so one of the things that we talk about a lot is the system, right? Because so many people feel like the system has failed them. And here's the reality, right? The system is there to pave the roads and put the guardrails up so you don't run off the cliff. And then also to set the speed limit. But at the end of the day, you're the one driving the car. You get to decide how fast you're really going to drive, what roads you're going to take, and most importantly, what tunes you're going to put on the radio of your road trip. And so we get to drive that car. We get to decide. And when you start to believe that from a team perspective, you want your teams to have that level of empowerment, and from an individual perspective, you want to have that level of control.
Right. And you also have more momentum. You feel better. You have a sense of agency.
Yes.
And that, I think that's what most people want, is they want to feel like they're going up and to the right. In the past, it was kind of easy. You found a patron and they took care of all the details. So when you say like treat yourself like a business, that also means that you got to do all the other business activities. And I found this just by running a podcast for the last 6 years is it's not easy to have that dream career where you have a lot of options. Part of it's marketing and having to put yourself out there and be discoverable. And that's not very easy for a lot of people. Like, I come from a digital media, filmmaking background. So it was a little bit easier for me to try and do a podcast, even if it sucked for like a few like first episodes. And I also just have no inhibition. So just naturally, I'm willing to be misunderstood and be like, do embarrassing things long enough until I am admired. But how do you coach people that, because like, part of a business is like, if you don't market, if people can't find your stuff, you fail anyways. How do you coach someone through that mental block of like, I need to be putting myself out there more so that I have more opportunities?
Yeah, and that's a great point. That's both internally within our organizations and externally within our industries.
That's a
and
good
within our
point.
practice. Because a lot of times it's so easy to hide your department and then just wonder why no one knows you're there, right? And then kind of get stuck that way. And so when we talk about making that correlation, businesses need strong salespeople, right? Because without sales, you have no customers. Without customers, you have your business. And then you also need those raving fans. You need that marketing presence and all of those types of things. And so when you're thinking about building your sales team as the CEO of You Inc., I want you to ask yourself, who do you have from an internal and external perspective in your power base? We talk a lot about networking, and networking is important, but that's not going to move the needle for you. What your power base is a subsection of that network that can and will make things happen for you. And you want to be that power base for other people as well, because you want to pay it forward as well as have the benefits of that. So who are your sponsors? And who are the people who are saying good things in the room when you're not there? Who are the people that are saying, hang on a second, I need to get Hayden in here because he's the only one in the company that can solve this problem? And who's willing to put their people's bonus at risk so you can get the extra money, because we all know that it just gets moved around because you made such a huge impact. And when you treat your internal peers and internal colleagues as your most valuable customer, things start to change, right? You care about what they want. You're going to deliver what you need, but you're also going to give them what they want. And so when you think about those people who are the biggest pains in the butt that you ever have to work with, and what would happen if you started treating them like your most valuable customer? And what would happen if everybody started to do that? So think about that in terms of building your power base, building your stakeholder relationships internally, well out of your department, and kind of do a 360. So you're sitting here. So who are the ones that you need to serve in terms of, we're all here to serve the customer, but who's in between you and the customer that you need to serve? And then also for the business partners that you have to work with, whether it's the shared functions, legal, compliance, risk, HR, finance, and make sure that you've got a strong stakeholder and power base in all of that. And then when we talk about that marketing internally, we're talking about self-promotion, which is something most people hate. You don't want to be that jerk that says, hey, look at me, I'm so awesome, and none of this would have happened without me, right? You just don't want to be that guy or girl. And so what I talk about in terms of internal self-promotion is you're going to find your sweet spot between your authentic style and the organizational culture. So the easiest way, especially as leaders, to self-promote is to give your team the credit because you just get it by proxy. Other ways to do that is talk about learning, talk about, instead of saying, hey, we did this, aren't we great? Say, this really worked well. I think we can apply this in other areas and share your knowledge. We didn't do this right. This really worked out well, and you can continue to move forward with it. From an internal perspective, you need a sales team and you need your marketing team, which is that self-promotion piece. Externally, especially for people who are less than excited to be on stages, less than excited to get out there and tell anybody who will ever listen about what they're thinking about, some of the easiest ways to get started to gain visibility is to start to piggyback off of other people's work, especially on social. You see a point of view and you agree with it or disagree with it, being able to share that point of view is important. Like a quick reshare on LinkedIn with the comments or your thoughts. Other ways that are fun and less scary is when you have industry conferences or you got workshops or things like that that are being hosted by third parties. 9 times out of 10, they're going to have panels. And so you don't have to be the only one out there, but you can sit on a panel and chime in and share your point of view. It's an easier way to kind of break into that. And also, I think we don't spend enough time building our power base externally. And we spend, our network is, typically, who we ever hang on to is just by luck, right? We meet people, we work with them for a long time, and then we move on. And then we leave them all behind us and we never go back. And so finding those few people that you are going to be able to learn from, I think, and continue to grow with are really important. Because a lot of times we think about marketing and sales just when we're job hunting and networking, right? It's like, I want out, I got to fire up my network, and I haven't talked to anybody in 10 years, so I'm kind of in trouble. But here's why building your power base externally can help you grow significantly. First of all, remember you're the CEO of you Inc. CEOs do not have all the answers. You know it all. But they have amazing advisors and an amazing community where they go to get those answers. You need to do the same thing. So I had a client that was in financial services, and she came to me because she knew she wanted to be a managing director in 2 years. And being an MD on Wall Street is very, very difficult. And the competition is fierce. The organization that she worked for was great. So there's a lot of top tier talent. She knew it was going to be a tough thing to do, especially in her first year, because probably you don't get it in your first year. So she came to me, and what we did is I had her list out the 10 people she loved working with the most over her entire career. And so she did that, and she said, I haven't talked to these people in forever. So you go cyberstalk them on LinkedIn. And these people are in very powerful positions in major banks all over the world. She's like, holy crap, I lost track of these people. Like, they're really, very, very senior. So she reached out to them. She was nervous, but she reached out to them. And she reached out to those 10, and 8 got back to her. And then 6 agreed to help. And what she said was, I'm trying to make managing director in 2 years. I'm looking for insights, perspective, ideas on what's happening in the market, what else is going on, so I can bring an innovative idea back to my organization and get noticed for something other than my day job. And they immediately surrounded her with the smartest people, data, insights, all of these things that she would have never had access to, all externally to her organization, to where she was able to come up with an idea, bring it back to her company, get it approved, funded, and selected to lead that in time to get it over the finish line before she made MD. So when you think about you're bored at work, or you think about, my people are uninspired, then go out and reach out to that power base. And if you don't have one, we'll make one. Reach out to those power brokers and be that for other people. Because A, it's more fun. You become much more interesting. And you learn so many other things to be able to move your career, and your business, and your teams forward.
Yeah, I call it having like a personal board of directors, right? Because most of the board of directors, if like you're the CEO, they're external, maybe investors, or like they have expertise that you want on the board. Like that's built into like that's like a perk of being a CEO is having hopefully like a good board to help
Sometimes
support
it's
and
not
advise you. So
that's
yeah, hopefully is the key word here. And yeah, like I really like how you talked about like, hey, if you're not comfortable with like the whole like external self promotion, like personal brand building, you could still market internally, right? You could build allies.
yes.
Yeah, you could develop allies internally. I know I've run out of fingers the people that have been saved from layoffs that I know because another department's like, no, don't, we
No.
won't keep them. We like them, but fire this other person. We wouldn't care if they were gone.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that person's valuable to me. Right. And when we realize at the end of the day, people really are very self-serving in nature, right? We want to
Mhm.
be altruistic and we do care about other people as long as our needs are met first. And so when you treat your internal colleagues as customers and not as just detractors that are getting in the way of what you want to do, then I think that's when you start to build your brand to where everyone wants you in the room because they know that they're going to get a win too.
Mhm.
And you can do this in a way that is incredibly transparent and open because I think everybody can win. I don't think we have to create an environment where for me to win, you have to lose. And when people know that you're that collaborator and that you're going to try and find an answer that everyone can rally around, sometimes there are no great answers, then you're seen as that leader that people want to follow, whether they work for you or not. And you can do that at every level within your career, right? In terms of that leadership. It's not a promotion, it's not a title. It is what you step into every day and you have a choice to do that.
Yeah, okay, I remember who it's from. So Alex Ramosi, who's like the current in vogue business influencer guru guy, but he always just has really great maxims. He talked about how people are like, I just want respect. I want people to respect me. And then their tactics are like throwing their weight around and being a bully and stuff. And he's like, how about you should replace the word respect with usefulness? I want to be useful. And usually respect is a byproduct of competency, being useful.
Yeah.
And I've definitely noticed that like in my career where it's instead of like trying to throw my weight and like, make a statement, make a point by like saying no to people, not going to a meeting because like that's how you get respect. I'm like, no, I'm going to condescend to myself, go to this meeting that I know I'm not going to enjoy, but I'm going to listen and be curious. And I've never regretted doing that. Because then I'm like, oh, like they want this thing. Okay, cool. I get it to them. All of a sudden, they're less mean, and eventually, we're buddies. And then eventually, they're asking for me to come into meetings because they know that I will unblock whatever they're doing. And yeah, like you don't like if you just want to be employed, like marketing doesn't mean like building a personal brand, But if you do want to do that, I mean, I wasn't a fan of like meetup events or conferences, like that was like, I don't have time. I'm a young father. I got kids. I don't want to be like taking time off. I also like don't like taking a couple days off. And so like I chose the harder route, but eventually gained more control, which is like, I'll just do a podcast because then I get to be the event and then I get to
You
meet
have
all
your
these
own stage
people.
now, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So like that's an alternative if you're an introvert like me. You still gotta do some extroverted stuff to find guests, but there's a lot of different ways that you can get yourself out there. You don't have to be this big influencer. You just have to be useful.
Yeah, and the reality is, even if you don't want to build your professional brand, if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it for you. You always have a brand, whether you want one or not. And so who would you rather influence your brand, you or other people? And so I think that's really important and a good way to think about that. You don't have to be out shouting from the rooftops or posting on LinkedIn every day or any of that stuff. But think about what are the first 3 words you want people to think about when they hear your name?
Hmm.
And then step into that every opportunity you have. And it was interesting. So I learned this lesson the hard way. We were in the middle of master transformation, and it was just 2 years of a total slob. And it was brutal. I mean, my manager was stressed out. Everyone was just gunning for us because we were the ones doing the change. No one wanted it. And it was just not a fun place to be. So I took my managers out for, blow off a little steam. So we had way too much tequila, way too many wings, and, a lot of fruit syrup going on. And I remember across a really crowded bar, it was loud. And one of my managers was like, do you know what we call you? And I was like, oh, I'm really afraid to hear this. Right? And I was drunk enough to be curious. So I'm like, all right, now, I don't. What do you call me? And then we call you the Velvet Hammer. Because when you kick in the ass, you'll do it, but it never hurts. And I was like, oh, that's one of the nicest things I've ever said about me.
That could have gone a different direction.
Yeah, a totally different direction. And so, but that was my brand. I didn't think about building a brand. This is just how I naturally acted. And at first I was like, I'm not a hammer. And I'm like, well, you kind of are. And it's true because you can't make hard decisions without, being firm on a few things. But I had a brand that I didn't know I was building. So to say I don't want a brand build, okay, fine. Someone else will.
People feel and think certain things about you no matter what. That's what a brand is. Like just because you don't have like a website or like any of the branding elements, people are going to feel a certain way about you. And they could also just feel apathy towards you, which is not a good brand.
No, it's terrible. You definitely don't want that, right? And so if you don't know, because a lot of times we've got blind spots in terms of how we're perceived. And we've got a women in leadership program that's called Own Your Power for female leaders, especially in STEM, to really help them accelerate in their leadership careers. But I have this picture that I show because it took me a long time to understand this. Because we didn't get into my background, but I didn't get my college degree until I was 40. And I was a managing director on Wall Street at 35. And it all started from, my parents splitting up. We were homeless for my mom, my sister, and I were homeless. So I didn't have any money and my grades were terrible. So I didn't go until much later, but I kept working and kept continuing through my career. So knowing I had the imposter syndrome before it was actually a thing, I always saw myself as that country girl that didn't travel and didn't have a degree and all that kind of fun stuff. And I was always in very male-dominated STEM industries like tech and finance. When I looked at myself, it was just me. But yet, as I continued to move up the ladder, people were treating me different. And I couldn't understand why. I'm like, it's just me. And so there's this one image of this woman with a son behind her and casting this massive shadow. Because you just see you. Everyone else sees that shadow. And that's how they respond. And so from a branding perspective and from thinking about what do other people think about you, sometimes you're going to have blind spots. Because I find, right, the higher up you get, the less honest people are going to be with you because you have more control. The higher up you get, the less people are going to tell you your ideas are bad because, again, of that power. And then the higher up you get, the bigger impact you make and your decisions. And you're further away from the work. So you don't know how the work is done. People aren't giving it to you straight. And the decisions you make have far-reaching implications. I mean, this is a trifecta that a lot of leaders struggle with. And so one of the best ways to know how you're perceived is to ask. And ask your biggest advocates and your biggest allies and adversaries, give me the first 3 words you think about when you hear my name. Because I guarantee you, none of them are going to be the things you think about yourself. And then ask yourself, am I happy with this? Or do I need to start to build a different brand for myself? And if so, then how can I show up differently? Because all of these things matter every single day. They're not written down anywhere, but they absolutely inform everyone's judgment.
Yeah, how do you do that? I mean, I've heard of like anonymous, like 360 reviews that kind of help like make them more honest on those 3 things. But how do you, like someone that doesn't like you, how do you know that they're giving you the right answer?
Well, because if you make the space for them to do that, by saying, listen, we never see eye to eye.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I say white, you say black, and this is just how, this is how we work together. And I'm just really curious to understand, just question, give me an honest answer, not afraid to hurt my feelings. Give me the first word you think about when you hear about it. Right? So when you make that space for them and just then try to, just random question, then most of the time you'll get the answers. Oftentimes when I would go to my friend and do this, I would get the honest answer because they could not wait to let it go. Right? And it's just like, this, you're controlling, you're whatever. And I'm like, okay. And the fun thing is don't react. Just think thank you.
It's just data.
Right, because it's not meant to be a conversation. It's not meant to have any kind of contextual, arguments or defensiveness to it or anything like that, right? So I think, just being able to do that and say, we never see eye to eye. I'm just really curious because I'm trying to figure out how I'm perceived. I think 360 is how I value, but I also think, like any other apprentice survey, you get the extremes. The only ones that actually participate are the ones that really love you or really hate you, right? So that's typically when somebody's going to fill out the survey, like, that's awesome, or, oh my God, that was the worst experience ever. And so having those check-ins, I think also making sure that you do surround yourself with people who don't agree with you. The biggest mistake we make, and what took me a long time to figure this out, is that
Yeah.
most people, like the vast majority of people, are operating from a place of good intent. Like they are not disagreeing with you just to make your life miserable for school.
They feel fear, like that their agenda's at risk, or
I don't even know that that's not. I just think they see things differently. And
Yeah.
leading big transformations and stuff, like we would always have people who disagree. Like more than did agree, right? Because the line of sight was very narrow in terms of trying to see where we were going. But what I found is that people are operating from offensive good intent. And those people who are the most difficult to work with and difficult to work for, and the ones that seem to say black every time you say white, no matter what, chances they have a perspective that you don't. And it's a valid one. And so when you slow down to try and understand where they're coming from, or in my case, there was a few where we were just never, ever going to communicate well together for whatever reason, but people on my team would be able to be effective. And I'd send them instead because I was not going to be an effective solution. But when you get through the emotion and you get through the controversy and you try and unpack why are they so on the other side of what we're trying to do here, there are nuggets of really important information there that you should be trying to find.
Yeah, and never split the difference. There, as Voss uses the accusation audit. It's like one of the ways to get people to be honest is you basically just say all the things that you know they're going to want to say to you, so that you take the ammo out of their gun, and then they could give you like more like deeper answers, right? So it's like I know like and this is what I do when I'm trying to get feedback. Is like, hey, I know I come off as like overbearing. I am overbearing. I'm an intense person. It's just, I just really care. I'm sure you think I'm an asshole. And then if they have more to say, they'll say, or they'll say like, yeah, you are an asshole. And then it's like, okay, let's talk more about that. Like it's being willing to have hard conversations, which I think is really tough in corporate America. If you're a business owner, it's easier to have hard conversations because it's like an existential threat to your business to take on more work that you're not getting paid for. You can just say, well, no, like we'd have to renegotiate my employment contract. And when you're in a corporate environment, you have an out. You could just be like, oh, well, let's just not talk about it. Like I'm still going to get my paycheck next week. But your mental health, your sanity, like, is it worth it to not just have that hard conversation in 30 minutes and then have the mental clarity to be creative later?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I would always do, especially as you move up into more senior levels of leadership, is I would have a meeting where the only agenda item was to find fault and risk in my idea. That was it. Like, here's our idea. Here's what we're thinking about. And the only thing we're allowed to talk about for the next hour is exactly what could go wrong. Is, what better ideas are there? Because if you say, oh, just give me your feedback, no one's going to do that. They're not. Especially the higher up you get. There's no way somebody's going to play your
Yeah, you're asking them to do the work, to use the mental energy to do your job for you. You have to set them up with a good prompt.
Most people will not. But when that is the only thing they can talk about, and you realize it's a place to start, not a place to finish, and together we're going to get this in a better place, then that doesn't just allow the permission, it creates an accountability to find those faults and to tell you the things you don't want to hear and to recommend different paths forward. And so I think we can start to adopt these things at every level within our career, because then that's just going to make you better. Because your best situation as a leader is that you are not the smartest person in the room. Right? You want to be surrounded by people who have superpowers that you don't, whose propellers spin faster than yours do, and really are able to raise the bar for everyone. That's not a threat. Absolutely a superpower. It's fantastic. And so I think too many people want to surround themselves with people where they feel like they're the smartest. But when you go the other way and open up that dialogue from an accountability perspective, so you find other ways forward and define the risks and define the flaws, now you're really working as a team and you're able to say the hard things in a safe way.
Yeah. Well, Tammy, I could keep going, but I guess for anyone that wants this conversation to keep going, just buy her book, Escaping the Career Trap. I'm probably going to I hope there's an audiobook because I need it for kid reasons. But is there anything that hasn't been said that you feel like needs to be said before we sign off on this conversation? And how can people find your work?
Okay. So one last thing I'm going to challenge our listeners with today is to get comfortable with an experimental mindset. Too often we think we're either success, fail, pass, good, bad, black, white. Whereas when you do everything in your career, in your life, in your business, taking that experimental mindset, knowing that you're going to iterate. So we're going to go this way. What does this button do? We're going to push that button, keep the things that work, get rid of the things that didn't, and try again, versus striving for something that is good or bad. And when you do that, you get comfortable with fear and you're moving your career and your business forward faster. So I'll leave you with that challenge to take on that experimental mindset. From a book perspective, you can grab the book at escapingthecareertrack.com. With that, you get a signed hard copy, some really cool free downloads, and some special love from me. But you can also get the book in soft copy, ebook, and audiobook on Amazon and Audible. What I ask everyone to do is reach out to me on LinkedIn if you've heard this podcast. Tammy Alvarez at Fear Winner Circle. Connect, let me know what you thought about the episode. I love getting feedback on people who have had a chance to listen. And then also you can grab us at careerwinnercircle.com for coaching and escapethecareertrack.com for coaching and speaking engagements, or for the book and speaking engagements.
Well, Tammy, thank you so much for coming on the show. You have a good one.
You too. Thanks for the time.
Hey listener, thanks again for listening to The Way of Product. As we power down today's session on the fusion of creativity and technology, let's solidify the energy you've gotten from our dialogue today. If you've gleaned insights or strategies that could turbocharge your projects, I have a small but powerful ask. Swing by the platform where you're hearing this and leave a review. Think of it as your digital high five to us. It's a fuel that propels this content to more creative technologists like you, amplifying the impact of the shared knowledge. So until our next interview, keep pioneering and pushing the envelope. Thanks again for lending your ears and your imagination to our community. Catch you on the next download.